So welcome. Thank you so much for coming along this evening. This is one of our career webinars hosted by the College of Legal Practice. My name's Alice Payne. I head up the business development and marketing at the college. And myself and my team spend quite a lot of time supporting and talking to prospective students about the SQE, about preparation for the SQE, but also about whether they know enough about becoming a solicitor. And that's what this panel session is all about. So thank you so much to our panelists who've agreed to join us today. And we're really going to try and spend the next hour understanding much more about what they do on a day-to-day basis, what they love, what they don't like and could do without, everything about what being a solicitor is all about to help all of you with your careers and just make some really well-informed decisions. So looking forward to spending some time listening to you all. Before I introduce the panel, just a little bit of housekeeping. So I've enabled closed captions. So if anyone should be able to find it, you can also view a transcript. You can switch that on using your settings on Zoom at the bottom. So you should be able to turn that on should you wish. There's also, as I said, there's the chat bar. So feel free just to add anything in there. If you'd like to ask us a question as we go along, it might just prompt you to have some questions for the panel. Feel free to use that. And then we will be recording the panel session as well, so you will have access to the recording afterwards. So hopefully you can just listen rather than worrying about taking too many notes along the way. The other thing I would say is thank you so much for all the questions that you have submitted when you registered for the event. We're going to focus in on the questions that really relate to the topics that we're going to talk about today. So I am aware that some people had lots of questions about the SQE, and what we will do in our team is make sure that we can get back to you separately about some of those, because the SQE will take up probably an hour in its own right, if not longer. So we're really going to focus in on the role of being a solicitor today, and apologies if you don't get your exact question answered. So what I'm going to do now is just ask the panel to introduce themselves and talk about maybe what they're doing now, but also a little bit about their legal career. And then we'll take it from there and learn a little bit more about what they do day to day. So Zafar, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Thank you, Alice. Good evening, everyone. My name is Zafar Afsar, and I'm a practicing solicitor. I qualified in 2011. My practice commenced in the financial litigation arena, and my claim to fame is I acted on behalf of Mrs. Susan Plevin in the landmark case against Paragon Personal Finance. It was a payment protection insurance case, and ultimately started in the county court, went all the way through the High Court's Court of Appeal, and ended up in the Supreme Court. This case, I can say, started with me in 2012 and stayed right up until 2019. And it was a case which involved a university lecturer where she was missold payment protection insurance, where the bank's undisclosed commissions, which weren't disclosed to her, and we ultimately were successful in the Supreme Court. At the same time, I was also involved in other financial mis-selling products involving undisclosed commissions. It can be loan commissions or PPI commissions. Currently, I also act on behalf of claimants who have claims against the Ministry of Defence. It's mainly noise-induced hearing loss claims. And I also supervise at the College of Legal Practice. And finally, I also spend some time setting up new departments at law firms that want to establish the financial mis-selling claims. And the new claim that you can say, which is kind of commencing now, is PCP claims, which is cars, individuals, consumers purchasing vehicles, and the lenders have not disclosed the commissions that they received on the finance, which they gave to the consumers. So that's my 12, 13 years there summed up there.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. That's so interesting. Thanks. We'll look forward to delving more into that in a moment. Dan.
Good evening, everyone. Nice to see so many of you with us. I'm Dan. I've recently qualified in August 2023, and I did my LLM and SQE prep with the College of Legal Practice. I'm currently a supervising solicitor at Cumbria Law Centre, focusing on that housing legal aid practice and also line management of 4 caseworkers dealing with employment law, debt and welfare benefits. Prior to that, I have background since 2016 working full-time at Citizens Advice, with a role around supervising the advice sessions there and also line management of a team of around 8 welfare benefit advisors. And on top of that, I'm also the chair of Cumbria Junior Lawyers Division, which I'm sure I'll talk about all of those things throughout the evening as well. So nice to meet you all.
Thank you. And Coralie.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. So I'm Coralie McKeivor. I'm currently a director in the real estate team at Freeths. And I'm also do a number of voluntary roles, one of which is I'm the current president of Bristol Law Society. Just to give you sort of a bit of background of where I got to, like how I got here. So I spent a few years after uni working in a variety of law firms, and I started like first in the post room, then admin, then paralegaling, and I spent 2 years working at DAC Beachcroft, it's an international law firm, in a real estate team, and that sort of set my grounding as becoming a real estate lawyer. I then changed firms to a small regional firm that specialised in property to qualify, and then on qualification moved to Simmons and Simmons, which is obviously a much larger firm, and again in real estate, just very, very different place again to work. And then since then I've been at national firm for Anstey, international firm CMS McKenna, and then moved to Freeths, which is where I am now, and I've been there for over 3 years. So each of the places I've worked have given me very different in terms of the culture and their style of working, and also just in the real estate work that they do and the type of clients that they work for. It's just a real sort of breadth of, even within the role of a real estate solicitor, working at each firm has been quite different, and I just wanted to share that because I thought that would be quite an interesting topic, and I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more on that as we go through.
Thank you. Well, what we might do is maybe we'll stay with you, Coralie, if that's okay.
Yeah.
And let's just talk a little bit more about what you do when you say you work in real estate, and what you do kind of day to day. Perhaps describe, I don't know, a typical day and how you would interact with clients and what you'd be doing.
Yeah, no, yeah, so as I said, I'm a real estate solicitor, and so that is basically dealing with anything to do with land and assets on buildings on land. I personally specialize in energy and infrastructure work, but throughout the course of my career, I've done a very broad spectrum and worked in all types of real estate. But the energy and infrastructure is real estate with a sector focus, and that might be working with developer energy clients and developers on things like solar farms, wind turbines, battery storage, and EV charging infrastructure, all of which is very relevant today for both from a governmental perspective in terms of achieving net zero and moving across to renewable energy. But it also means that I work cross transactions and cross professionals as well. So we do a lot of work with other departments and other technical consultants and other energy specialists. And so we do a lot of work that's broader than just, the sort of general drafting of a contract. But the day-to-day work is mainly drafting. So we do a lot of drafting of contracts. We do a lot of investigation of property title and ownership and problem solving. And we do a lot of, managing clients' expectations and having meetings and calls with clients, often with many, many parties on the call. We would have someone from a landowner and a developer and their legal representation, their agents, their technical advisors, and it'd all be in one call trying to, push the deal forward, and meet whatever deadline the client is asking you to meet. So that is sort of how I spend the majority of my day. Also, as a director, a supervisor. So I supervise the trainees and legal assistants coming through the program, and I also supervise, members of the team. So I have responsibilities in that way, in addition to doing technical work.
So you gave a couple of examples of transactions there. Could you just maybe give another couple for us, particularly, I think, in terms of the energy side of things? I think people be quite interested in those. So how do you get involved in the energy side of your clients', I guess, ambitions or what they're looking to do?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So a couple of my clients might be, so for example, we act for Centrica PLC, which is obviously part of British Gas, and they are trying to transition their energy portfolio into renewable energy. So a lot of the work that we do for them is either acquiring existing projects, so like where someone has already built out a solar farm and they want to sell it, and we want to buy it, and we're doing our due diligence on it and looking at their contracts and making sure that they're good contracts and that they, that it's worth money for us to actually buy, and we end up with a functioning solar farm. We also do brand new schemes, so that might be either driven by a developer or a landowner who has spare, normally a farmer, has some spare fields, wants to generate some income from it. And we act on both the developer side, i.e. someone like Centrica, and on the landowner side, someone like the landowner and the farmer. And we look at the viability of that site and do the title due diligence, which is basically, can they actually use the land for this piece of equipment, and can they get a grid connection, which is, i.e. can they get an electricity supply to the site to actually run the equipment and take the energy back to grid. And so we will do all of that sort of due diligence for them, looking at the site and help them with applying for planning permission. And then they'll go off and do the sort of technical stuff with their design team and their planners and whatever. And we won't do much in that phase. And then they'll come back to us when they've got planning and they're ready to go. And they're like, right, we want to actually do this now. And then we'll advise them on that phase as well.
Oh, okay. Oh, that really helps. That's quite interesting. Thank you. Okay. Dan, do you want to just talk about your role? I don't have any similarities within that, or I imagine it's very, very, very different day to day, but you want to share a little bit more about what you do?
Yeah, so the bulk of what I do is in that housing legal aid sphere. So we're quite a small charity with a legal aid contract for Cumbria. And I'll run with every aspect of my own caseload, from that initial contact right through to the court work. So those things that we're most dealing with around defending possession proceedings, if somebody's a tenant or owner occupier of property, action against them to recover possession of that, serious disrepair issues which are causing harm to health, as well as challenging local authority homelessness decisions. I think a large part of what I'm doing is covering the court duty desk at the moment. So on a possession day, which tomorrow happens to be one, I'll pick up anybody who comes into court that day with a possession case who hasn't got legal representation, effectively work as the A&E triage of, I've got 10 minutes to work out what the problem is, and then we're going to go in, we're going to see the judge and put forward the case. So that's a large part of what I'm doing. But without, I do then pick up some of those that run on to what we call legal aid certificates, where you've got public funding to put forward any defence or counterclaim they may have, and we'll run through all of those as well and go get directions, gather expert evidence, gather any other evidence that we need, and put forward the case. I don't think there's any typical day for me. That's a rough overview of what I'm doing, but we are a small charity. There's a lot of thinking on your feet and running around and doing different things. And that's my legal practice. I'm also then involved in the operational management of the charity as well, and doing line management and all of the different things that brings with it as well. But I'll focus purely on the solicitor side for today.
Yeah, thank you. So in terms of your clients, are they very much clients that obviously they come to you, they're individuals who come to you and they need help, and then when it gets to a certain level, I guess that's when you get involved, or it's when it gets to that kind of area where they need yourself as a solicitor, because presumably it's a different role a little bit to the other members of the team?
Yeah, so we do tend to pick up things when it gets to the court stage. Under legal aid, we've got two different stages really. We've got early help, which is before court. So my landlord's given me notice to leave the property. What do I do? And that's kind of revolving around, can we avoid court action? Can we reach a resolution without it going to court? And there's a second stage of, this is now a possession case, or in the case of homelessness, this is now challenging the homeless department and going through an appeal to the county court, or looking at a judicial review of the decision. And that's where we as a solicitor plays a role. A lot of firms would separate that up and have caseworkers that do a lot of the early legal side of things, and solicitors that deal with the more complex cases. Being such a small team, we deal with the whole range, and obviously that has stresses on capacity of what we can take, and we're constantly trying to prioritize what is the most important for us to have an impact on, which tends to be those court issues where no other agency can support them locally.
Yeah, I get asked sometimes about what is the difference? What can a solicitor do that a lawyer or someone else in the team can't do? So what's the difference for you in your case, Dan?
That's a difficult one because I don't have another person in the team that isn't a solicitor. But I guess if I compare it to our advice agency, it is that more complex litigation when it gets to those possession proceedings, where they don't have the expertise or specialist knowledge. So if, for example, there's a quite complex antisocial behaviour allegation, we have that expertise to break it down and understand what the issues are and put that case forward to defend the possession proceedings.
Yeah, thank you. So Zafar, how does your day compare to Dan's day and Coralie's?
Yes, I think there's some similarities and some differences as well. So typically for the last few years, my involvement in law firms has been in the litigation stages. So once cases have reached that stage where they need to be issued and particulars of claims need to be sent off to the defendants, that's where I get involved. So the particulars of claims have been sent off. And then typically in the financial mis-selling cases, the main hurdle you can say is the allocation stage. So if the case is going to be allocated to the small track, the fast track, or the multi-track, and my involvement over the years, especially the last 3-4 years, has been at that stage where we are trying to persuade the court that the case should be, for example, on the fast track or the multi-track because of various reasons, financial value being one of them, but then complexity being another one. The defendants who we go up against are primarily banks, financial institutions, and they in these types of cases, they will say that the cases are always straightforward and easy, and they try to persuade the courts that the cases should be on the small track. And then what usually happens in these types of cases, the courts will fix a allocation hearing. So over the years, I've been conducting the allocation hearing on behalf of the claimants, and it's usually you're usually up against a specialist barrister. So, and especially after COVID, most of these hearings have been telephone hearings, which has been really useful in terms of conducting the hearings at your own leisure as well. So that's something which I have been doing over the last few years. So that's my financial role, you can say. In terms of the other litigation firm that I'm involved in, it's dealing with the medical agency. So this is in respect of the claimants who have claims against the Ministry of Defence for their noise-induced hearing loss claims. So you are dealing with medical agencies to try to obtain the medical reports from them, and then disclosing the medical reports to the defendant and trying to settle these cases before having to issue court proceedings. So you can say the difference in those two jobs, the main difference is the first one was more litigious, where you have to issue the cases at court, and they would go, some of them would go all the way to the final hearing or the trial, if it's a fast track or a multi-track, whereas my other work is more, you can say it's pre-litigation. Most of them settle before they even reach the issuing stage. And then finally, my third job, you can say, is with the university. I'm a supervisor and I thoroughly enjoy it, especially when it's regarding dispute resolution. So on some of them, the advocacy is something which I get the privilege of being a judge and listening to students deliver their advocacy. So I really enjoyed that. Yeah, so those are my three main jobs, you can say, at this present moment.
Yeah, that's great. That's such a great breadth between us all of different types of roles, and it was helpful to hear you describe them all. I'm hoping Coralie will reappear. Maybe her Zoom connection's disappeared, so hopefully she'll come back. What I would like to ask is, any of the attendees, please feel free to, now that you've heard what each of the panelists do, please pop a question in the chat if you want to find out a little bit more about that particular type of role. And then hopefully we can put that to the panel as well. So don't think, just going to see whether I'll just keep going. Hopefully I'll just keep going and Coralie will just come back to us. So what we're going to just think about now is how you found yourself in your area of law and how you decided what you wanted to do as a solicitor. So I mean, Dan, for you, like, what was your thinking in terms of why you wanted to focus on the work that you do, and how did you go about doing that and finding out more about it?
So I think it was largely by accident. I do think about this a lot. I volunteered at Citizens Advice whilst I was at university from 2014 onwards, and it naturally just became social welfare law that I was dealing with in the main, in that both voluntary capacity, but then the job offer that came down the line after I graduated. And that meant that I'd built up that kind of practice and had the qualifying work experience ready to go. And when the SQE became an option, I could just go through the exam process and then qualify that way. So having done that, it was kind of by chance that at the same time the law centre had this opening, and I naturally then found, well, this is the perfect opportunity to then go into practice doing a similar kind of work. I think it is something that I really struggled at university. I had no idea what I wanted to do, where I would end up. And I think what I would say and what I say to a lot of our law student volunteers is, if you are at that stage, just have an open mind with everything. Find out what you don't enjoy as much as finding out what you think you will enjoy. Because, you know, that kind of training process gives you that exposure to a lot of different areas. And you can also get involved in those non-traditional areas like myself, Citizens Advice law centres, local government, those non-traditional law firms which do quite important legal work just as much.
Yeah, thank you. And Zafar, for you, how did you find yourself enjoying litigation, and how did you get to that point?
Yeah, so it was actually really daunting for me to begin with, because I was a trainee solicitor and I actually hated litigation when I was studying the legal practice course, the LPC, and it's at that time the first job that you get after university, you just grab the opportunity to obviously gain some legal experience. And for me, the firm that I joined specialized in litigation. and I had no choice. To be fair, I had to learn the ropes in litigation, and because we were a small firm, the senior solicitor and the partner, they used to send me to trials. And at that stage, because the law wasn't established, most of these were either fast track or multi-track trials at 3 days or 2 days. Of course, we had a barrister there as well, but ultimately the barrister, they get their instructions from the solicitor, and you had to make sure that the instructions and all the necessary documents and the points were made by the barrister and they weren't missed. So at the beginning, I didn't actually enjoy the litigation experience, but quite quickly, once I attended 2 or 3 trials up and down the country, I started to enjoy it more and more. And then there was a period where probably spanning 3 or 4 years where we were just traveling up and down the country trying to establish this principle, which is now known as the Plevin principle. And I thoroughly enjoyed it after that. And then I guess it's something which builds up in experience when you are engaged in something for a long time, and then it's your normal day-to-day work. You start to like the work and enjoy it more. So it was the early journey for me was quite difficult, but then once I gained more experience, I started to enjoy it more.
Yeah, thank you. Welcome back, Coralie. How you doing? All right?
Yeah, fine. My computer decided it needed to do an update at that moment in time.
No worries at all. Well, we've just been talking a little bit about how people and how Zafar and Dan ended up in their areas of work. I'm going to ask you, Zafar, just a question we've got in that chat about the difference between the kind of barrister role and the solicitor role. And I think because we've got quite a lot of international students on here, as international lawyers as well, sometimes the language and the terminology is quite different, isn't it? So could you just share a little bit about the difference from your perspective?
Yeah, of course. So in the litigation world, the barristers are the ones that present the case before the judge. So they are the advocates. It's the solicitors who prepare the case and deliver all the relevant documents together with the instructions to the barrister. And then ultimately, it's the barrister who will deliver the case verbally before the judge. The role of the solicitor here, I think, is really important. Not only does the solicitor have to ensure that the case is well prepared, but more so, and something which I was directly involved in, is making sure that the barrister actually follows those instructions in court as well. It might sound like it's straightforward, but there's been so many instances where a barrister may have missed something, and because the solicitor has been working on that case for in some instances for years, the solicitor knows that case inside out. And then you just have to make sure that the barrister has delivered all your points and not missed out anything crucial. So to summarize, it's the barrister who will advocate the case before the judge at court, whereas the solicitor will make sure that he's prepared everything from beginning to end.
Thank you. That's really helpful. So, well, thank you very much. Keep adding the questions into the chat. We'll certainly get to some of them in a little while. Coralie, for yourself then, it sounds like obviously you found real estate pretty early on. Did you always like it from the beginning as an area? What interested you?
Yeah, no, I didn't particularly like it at uni, if I'm completely honest. I found landlord really, really dry. I did the RPC and I quite enjoyed it in the RPC because it was a lot more practical and more aligned with what you actually do day to day. But I don't think it was really until I started practicing it that I loved it. But I had the advantage of, as I said, doing 2 years working as a paralegal before doing my training contract. So I knew I liked it at that stage. So then when I came to do my training contract, I knew that that was definitely what I wanted to do. And I think what I loved about it is like the problem solving aspect for the client, and just, you know, delivering like real estate projects for the client. And I think for me, what was exciting was actually being able to see the properties. You know, they're very real and very tangible. So when I was a paralegal, I worked on both Westfield London and Westfield Stratford, which included the opening of Westfield Stratford, which was a really, really exciting, as a real estate lawyer, milestone of trying to get everything lined up for the opening. And then actually going around it and seeing all the shops that I had helped deliver, which I just thought was really cool and fascinating and everything else. So I think that was sort of why I got into it and excited about it. But it's so broad. There's, you know, even within real estate, there's something for everyone. And I think when someone's looking to find their practice area, I think you've just got to try everything and see what you like. And you might like something you didn't think you would like, because I really didn't think I would like property when I did land law and was studying at uni. I thought it would be the dullest thing ever.
There you go. Thank you for that. Dan, there's a question here. I will take some of these. I'm not going to quite take them in order necessarily. How do you find separating yourself from work emotionally, working in social welfare law? This attendees are looking to go into family law, but it works in very difficult cases.
Thank you. I think that's a really important question, and it's something that I've already thought about before coming on tonight. I think emotional resilience is so key in certainly my line of work, but probably a lot of areas as well, and family being a quite clear one. One thing I often say to people who are coming through to us as law student volunteers is, we don't see people on their best day, and that can be quite taxing. And I think learning to practice your own emotional resilience is key to dealing with that. It's knowing to reach out to colleagues and talk about those kind of cases that do attach to you emotionally, because they do. It's people's lives, it's people's homes, it's naturally going to attach to you. And making sure you look after yourself and take time for yourself. And that sometimes means saying, from my perspective, I'm at capacity, I need to focus on what I've got. I can't add another one into my bucket right now. And that's something that I think is so important. And also one of the skills to develop is saying no. So yeah, I think there's a lot of things around emotional resilience, and you could probably do a whole session around that, but practicing self-care is the key thing. Yeah.
And for lots of different reasons, but yeah, I guess also, yeah, working with quite vulnerable clients. I mean, some of your clients, Zafar, must also, you know, make you feel quite emotionally involved sometimes. How do you separate yourself from your work like that?
Yeah, so similar to Dan, I think, in terms of these, most of the clients that I have acted for, especially in the financial arena, they come from modest backgrounds, and in terms of monetary value, they don't have that much, and they're up against huge financial institutions. So when you succeed for them, and so, in terms of a monetary reward, you can see that they are overjoyed. And in terms of the second job that I have, I think it's even more satisfying, because the most of our clients have been working have been with the army as well. So for them to see how they live their life, and the life after leaving the army as well, it can be quite interesting. And again, when you do succeed for them, it's a nice feeling at the end of it.
Yeah. Thank you. There's a question here about litigation. I think you might be best placed to answer that one as well. So it's so hard to decide what area of law to go into. I like to analyse and investigate evidence. So would that be a natural leaning towards litigation?
Absolutely, I would say so. Absolutely. And it's giving me flashbacks, that question, because I still remember the disclosure stage of the cases, the financial cases that I've been involved in. And the documents, some of them, the subject access requests that used to come back were hundreds and hundreds of pages, sometimes even thousands, and then to break down that and to find something within those documents and that paperwork. For example, in my case, when you found out that the lender had received a commission in excess of 90% of the loan premium, it's I would say that's investigative work where you are actually investigating something and you have found some disclosure. And in litigation, especially financial litigation, I suppose across the board in terms of disclosure is something which is so important. And if somebody feels like they have got a good eye for detail and they enjoy evidence, I think that's something which is natural for good litigators.
Thank you. And Coralie, you talked previously, you mentioned about whether you're transactional or litigious lawyer, I should say. And from your side, how do the skill sets, or is it a preference, differ from in those two roles when you're working alongside your colleagues?
Yeah, no, I mean, I find that I like poring over a piece of paper for a very long time. I do quite a lot of telecoms work, which involves working very, very closely with our litigation team. And they like nothing better than, getting on a call and talking about the nuances of the telecommunications code and talking about the minute detail and all the various case law, of which is lots, and all the arguments about what benefits their client. And then it's up to me to actually document it all. So they'll talk for a very, very, very long time, and I'm scribbling lots of notes and then trying to actually make it work in a document that facilitates all the amazing problem-solving ideas that they've come up with on the call with the other side and with their barrister. And it's not that each other can't do elements of each other's roles, but I think they are naturally more inclined to be speakers and talk about things and collaboratively, whereas I like to take my time and think and ponder over some text rather than speak about it, just the way my brain works. And so I find that I'm personally more aligned to writing on a piece of paper and consolidating my thoughts that way.
It's interesting because one of the questions submitted was, what skills do you need to be a successful solicitor? So for you, Coralie, for your role, that's really different from possibly the person next to you as well. What would you say for your skill set?
Yeah, so I think that I'm good with the drafting and the detail, but I would also say that I'm not overly a technical detailed lawyer. So some people like to know every single word and comma and placement, whereas I'm more like people and collaboration and having conversations with people to problem solve and hit a workable and legal and effective solution. But I think also your skill set changes because you might need to do more client facing things, or you might need to be better at communication, or I mean every role needs communication skills, but whether that's verbal communication skills or writing communication skills and how you develop those over time. But there's nothing that can't be learned. It's more what comes naturally to you and what's within your comfort zone might push you towards your strengths, but and therefore your preferences and what you choose to do. But everything can be learned to a certain degree.
Thank you. So just thinking a bit more about what it's like day to day. I mean, Dan, you spoke about obviously specific question about your clients and the people that you're supporting, but is it also, I mean, we talked a little bit about resilience. Is it quite stressful being a solicitor? Have you had to overcome any adversity in your career for this point as well?
I think it is stressful. Obviously, we're dealing with people's lives and homes, and that's never not going to be stressful because you're usually on one of their worst days and you've got to try and put together the puzzle pieces in some cases, like tomorrow when I'm at court, in about 10 minutes to try and make a convincing argument as to why they shouldn't lose their home. So I think that's one of the big things, and burnout is something that's a real risk, and one of the things I would always tell people to be mindful of in this kind of work, because you do need that emotional resilience. I probably would keep coming back to that in any case where I'm talking about the stressful side of the job. But the flip side is it's so highly rewarding, and it's about people and your community, and that I think has a big driving factor for me, because it's an important part. It's that access to justice what a lot of people don't have, and that's why they are there 10 minutes before court with their bag of paperwork without a clue of what to do. And I think it's an important part that there is that duty desk for them to go to and get support on the day. I don't know if I've trailed off your question there, but I'll leave it there.
Thank you. And in terms of your work-life balance, Dan?
I have a very good work-life balance compared to a lot of my friends who are solicitors. I love my 9 to 5 and flexible working arrangements. So we do, as a charity, my boss will often say at a law centre, we can't make you rich, but we can be flexible around you. So I do have a lot of flexibility there, and that's important for dealing with that stressful side as well.
That's good. And Zafar, how about you in terms of the stress of your job as you may see it and your work-life balance?
So I think for me, I've always thrived on pressure. I like pressure, and I think in litigation, if you can be cool and calm and collective, as they say, that's a good trait to have. If you don't work well under pressure, I think, especially for litigation, that can then be a challenge. So I've always thrived under pressure. In terms of work-life balance, I think at the beginning of your career, especially when you are a trainee solicitor, I think there is no such thing as 9 to 5. You have to put the hours in, and especially with the competition that there is. So I would advise perhaps at the beginning of your career, the first few years especially, just giving that extra bit of commitment, and in terms of just going the extra yard, I would say. But then what I would say is after you've qualified, it does, especially for me, for my journey, it got easier and easier. And now, for example, I've been practicing for 11 years, and obviously I have a family now as well. And I get to do the school runs every morning. So my employers, the last 2-3, have been really flexible in that aspect. And I get to go gym most evenings, so it's nice. But I think at the beginning it was quite intense. But as the years went by and the experience increased, it did become more flexible.
Thank you. So lots of questions coming through from people. I'm just making sure I don't miss any. I'm going to go right back to the top of the questions. First of all, someone did ask whether everyone here is a supervisor with the college. So Zafar, you're supervising our students at the college. And then we've got a mixture of people on the panel. And Dan, you studied with us at the college. That helps. There's a few questions around how to become a solicitor as an international lawyer. And what I might do is send through some information to those people around the SQE route, and also some various guidance that we've got around that. I think, I guess the thing that to ask the panel around how to become a lawyer in the UK is if you are an international lawyer, but you want to move into the legal sector here in the UK, maybe Coralie, I don't know how would we help guide people to know where to start if they're interested in, moving into practice here in the UK?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's the official SQE and qualification bit, but I think, and I'll obviously let you share the guidance on that. But in terms of like a practical sense, I mean, for many international law firms, and I've worked at a couple. You have people who are qualified in other jurisdictions, but then they work for an international law firm because typically there's a need for their skills, because a lot of the work that we do is cross jurisdictional, and that can be a really good starting point in terms of getting a foothold into, if you're already working and want a job, even if it's not as a sort of qualified, technically, UK qualified solicitor, but there'll be a place for you within the business, because they always need those skills. And then some firms will effectively sponsor you to, not all, but some cross qualify. And it's really about, showing how your skills work for, that firm. Another, one of the things, obviously, at firms that I've worked at, language skills is obviously really, really highly valued as well. So pairing those two can work really, really well. And also just, getting the experience and showing how your experience applies to what that firm does in their sort of day to day.
Thank you. Dan, there's a question here about balancing your academic social life while maintaining your career. I mean, you've just been studying for 2 years and taking the SQE. I guess any advice for people on that who are experiencing that at the moment?
So I was working full-time alongside part-time study, and it's hard. It really is. I think the main thing I would recommend is to be really strict in a way of time management. And when I say strict, I do mean looking after yourself as well. So it's like, this is when I'm at work, this is what I need to do for study, this is what I need to do to have fun and switch off, and just really compartmentalize it, because I was quite easily drawn into, I'm just studying full time, or I'm putting it off, I can't face it right now. And you do need to just really break it down, and that is something I don't think I'd have passed the SQE if I didn't manage to master that before the exam, because it's so difficult, and it is a difficult exam. It's the hardest professional exam I've ever sat, so I do really recommend considering time management and how you'll balance that in, and talk to your employer, make sure they're on board, because it isn't easy and they need to know that it's taking up your time. If you are in the legal profession and they want you to sit this, make sure they're carving out time so you can focus on it. I get a lot of questions from people who are being sponsored to do the SQE as a trainee solicitor effectively, but their employer isn't giving them time. And that, I just don't think computes. You can't do a full caseload as a trainee and sit the exam. So really do make sure you're banging the drum of what you need as well to sit the exams and any kind of study around your work, in that fact.
Yeah, I do think more and more, I mean, Zafar, we're seeing this, aren't we? There are students that are working already in the legal sector. They can do some work outside working hours, but really you need to find some time within that time as well. It's too much to do the two together, unless you wholly have no choice and you have nothing else that you need to do across the, your evenings and weekends. Zafar, anything to add?
Yeah, I just want to amplify the point that Dan's made. I think speaking to your employers is definitely advisable, and I do find, and some students, for them it's great their employers have given them the time, but some of them, especially the ones that are in the working at a law practice, is actually really difficult for them, because the employer is not a law firm, or doesn't really perhaps value the SQE for their staff as much as a law firm would for their prospective trainee. So that is a difficult one. There is no right or wrong answer, I guess, but I think it's important to speak to your employers and ultimately think. I always say this in my one-to-ones that I have with my students: put yourself at the top. And what I mean by that is, think that this is what you need to do to complete, to become a solicitor. So you have to sometimes you have to be selfish and think about yourself and what works best for you and what kind of things you need to do to make sure that you can have the best shot at the SQE. So everything that Dan has said, basically, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So a good question here. Who wants to take this one? How do you stay organized and ensure deadlines are met? Coralie, I don't know if that's one for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just good diary management is very, very key. And managing clients' expectations as well. So you never know what might happen, particularly in what I do, you never know what happens in any given day. So you need enough free time in the day to deal with unexpected things. So it's a combination of the two. It's knowing the hard deadlines and your diary management of those and planning ahead, and then also planning for the unexpected and having enough room in your day to actually deal with those things. And that is really important if you want to maintain your work-life balance and have the ability to say no and all the other things that everyone else has been talking about. Because if you don't manage your time, then you will find you don't have enough time in the day and you will struggle to keep those boundaries.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So a couple of questions about, I guess, building on that, the culture of the law firm. You've worked in quite a few different ones, Coralie. Hopefully when it says, do you like it? Hopefully you've found yourself a firm where you like the culture, but does it vary through different firms, the culture?
Yeah, no, it definitely varies and everyone has different experiences. So you could be in the same team and have a completely different experience of the firm because it depends on your clients and who you work with and who your supervisor is and lots of different things that so you could be identical on paper and have a completely different experience. I mean, I love where I work now and it's definitely, I've found a home that works for me. And I think with each firm I worked at, I've learned a lot more about myself as well. It's like, oh, I like this aspect of the culture and didn't like, because I need the sort of fast pace and adrenaline rush and the deadlines and I will work on deals with magic circle firms and be up late at night but I need that adrenaline rush. When I did a job that was purely 9 to 5, I actually got bored and I procrastinated because there wasn't that sort of adrenaline hit to get me up, whereas other people loved that. Was I think I've reached a happy medium of having the fast-paced big work, but I've got the flexibility to do what I want with my time. And that for me is what I find is work-life balance, being able to do what I want when I want to a certain degree, but that doesn't mean that you're not doing the late nights and the long hours when the deal requires it.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. Always ask a busy person to do something more, right? And in terms of there's a question here around getting into the sector, which is a question a lot of people submitted as part of the registration process. So what would all of your advice be for someone who's trying to get into the sector? I think this question here, they don't have a particular law background, but even if they do, it's still really hard. So Zafar, what would you say to people to help them get into the work experience, into sector, into that maybe trainee role, but what would be your advice?
So I think twofold. My advice would be the first one is the obvious one. Of course, try to send as many applications as you can, with a good covering letter to the law firms that you want to work for. And I don't think, for me, I started off as a legal assistant. So I completed my LPC, and the first role that I had, it wasn't for a paralegal role, it was for a legal assistant. And I don't think, looking back at it now, I think if I could do it again, I would do the same thing again, because I actually really enjoyed the legal assistant role, albeit it was only for a short time, but it kind of made me understand how a law firm works from start to end, and for me that was really good. So what I would say is, because competition is is obviously it's difficult, especially in the legal sector. You can apply for legal assistant role. It doesn't mean that you've demotivated yourself, or is something which is frowned upon. I think starting off as a legal assistant is something which is good. And then somebody was asking, there was a question about culture. I just wanted to add, I worked in Manchester first to start off with for approximately 10 years. And then I took the dive to London for 2 years, and I saw a massive difference in culture. And what I mean by that is, obviously London has a reputation for being fast-paced, but that applied at the law firms as well, because the 9 to 5 in London was actually non-existent. It was long hours, but bizarrely, it felt like doing long hours for a London firm was a normal. It didn't feel like it was unusual or anything. And then when I came back to Manchester 2 years in London, it was back to more the 9-5 hours. So London has this thing that, yes, it's fast paced in many aspects, but I saw there was a lot of competition for jobs as well. Whenever we put out a job advert in at the London firm, you'd have probably 50, 60 people apply for 2 jobs. And so I just wanted to share that with the audience, that from my experience, I found London to be a really, really busy place, and more like where I think your social life could potentially suffer, from my experience.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you. And Dan, for you, I mean, your role, it didn't go straight into kind of a trainee solicitor role either. So what would your advice be for people looking to get into the sector?
I'd say it's a marathon, not a sprint, and take your time and be prepared to think outside the box, because there is a lot of the legal profession which is not the traditional law firm route. And I mentioned it earlier, think about local government, think about the charity sector, think about in-house, because those are very valid options, as well as valid is the traditional law firm route. So be prepared to think outside the box, because those experiences are there, and you can. I remember when I was confirming my qualifying work experience, and that was somebody who had done the traditional law firm route, and going through my skills I'd gained at Citizens Advice, and it was remarkable for her just how advanced I was compared to trainees that she would normally see in terms of the skills I'd had exposure to. So in terms of that legal research and writing and drafting, I'd had a lot of exposure, but also to the more soft skills of advising people and having that connection with clients to extend putting things forward. So I guess my takeaway is be prepared to think outside the box.
Yeah, thank you. And for you, Coralie, you went another route via the paralegal route, and then you got your training contract. What would you be saying?
Yeah, no, I think, start where you can and get your foot in the door, essentially, and if people will recognize that you can do the job, or you learn skills to do other things. So, my assessment day and my training contract interview was drafting a property transfer, and I've been doing that day in, day out for months. So it made my assessment center, in my mind, really, really straightforward. But I wouldn't have got those skills without having done the job as a paralegal, and that then helped me ultimately get my training contract, even though it was a different job and a different firm. It wasn't necessarily progressing through the internal track, not that obviously can't be done, and so I think everything that you learn is a skill for something that you'll use on your journey. And I completely echo what Dan said about it, being a marathon. You'll be doing this for the rest of your career. You don't have to be in a rush to get there straight away. And also, look after yourself and be selfish and do what's best for you as well. Ultimately you want, and I think Zafar alluded to this earlier, ultimately you want to get qualified. So you do what you need to, and the business is never going to look after you first. They're there to make money, as much as it pains me to say it. And so you need to look after yourself and get yourself qualified. And that means doing what's right for you.
Yeah, and in terms of thank you for that. I think that's really helpful to remember. And in terms of someone's put a question about volunteering or trying to get that work experience, like that first point in terms of getting into a firm or legal organization, Coralie, what would you advise in terms of helping someone eke open that opportunity?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends what stage you're at. So if you're still at university, doing volunteering and working for, law clinic or whatever your university offers you by way of extracurriculars, and so in positions of responsibility are still the traditional things that, partners look at when they see a CV. As you get maybe doing your first job or, starting into the legal profession, doing those roles or signing up if you're not working in the legal profession yet, still taking the time to do vacation schemes or awareness days or law firm days where you can, because that is a step in the right direction and gets you a foot in the door. Firms will still look on that favorably, even if it means, taking annual leave or if your job won't let you, and actually going to do that. Because it does still count for a lot, and also you still get the experience of understanding what that particular firm is like and what practice areas they offer, and depending on how it's structured, get some work experience in those practice areas.
Yeah, I think so. And Zafar, did you end up having to, I don't guess, knock on doors and things? What do you say to your students to help them find that local work experience?
Yeah, so I think this probably relates to the point that I was making, going for a legal assistant role as opposed to a paralegal role. So yes, of course, if you can get some local work experience, which basically means you've emailed or you've even hand delivered your application form. But if you're struggling for the paralegal role because the competition is so rife, then just even if it's, can I help put the files away, or it can be, I suppose, putting the files away now. I'm showing my age now because everything is probably electronic. But the point is, don't be shy to start off from a lesser role, from a paralegal, and that did me really well. And the advice that I've given to others and the ones that have actually followed that advice, their feedback is the best thing that they've done, because they believe in their ability, that ultimately they have their lawyer skills. So when they've gone in their respective firms and they've started from the bottom, you can say, somebody's identified their skill quite quickly. And I tell you one thing from experience: if I know, because if I am if I'm recruiting for a paralegal and I know I have a few legal assistants already at my firm who have the qualifications to go down that route, I will probably look in-house first, as opposed to interviewing someone. So you can say it's just being at the right place at the right time. So if you've already got your foot in the door via the legal assistant or admin route, and somebody at the firm knows that actually you can do a lot more than that, then they will give you a chance. So I think that's something which is a good route to take.
Yeah, thank you. A couple of questions we haven't answered yet. One was about changing the field of law, where they're already working in an area in immigration and they'd like to change. Can it be quite difficult, I guess, to change? And then another question about labour law practitioners and solicitors collaborating on workplace disputes. I'm not sure if anyone would want to tackle that one. Does anyone feel like they can contribute on that question?
I can try with the first one of changing the areas of law, and let somebody else take the second one. So I think one thing you have to remember here, again, it's a reality situation here. If, for example, if you've been practicing as in litigation for 4 or 5 years, and then you want to change and do immigration, I think one thing which you will find is whatever you are getting paid to do for your litigation route, it will be a lot less because of the experience as well. So depending on how much you like or dislike your area, you will find in terms of your finances that if you are going to start a new role, you won't be paid as much because obviously you have experience in a different role. So I've seen that a few times. So that's something that I would say when you are thinking of changing the roles. And then I suppose it depends on the law firm that you are at. If your law firm is a specialist law firm, then you might have to go and apply, and it's pretty much starting from scratch again, applying for a job at a different firm, and then having to learn from inception again. So if you are willing to do that and you have the energy to do that, then yes. But those are the two things that I would say.
Yeah, I think it's very similar to other roles. I think we're going to leave the South African example, so apologies. We can't help too much on that one. Dan, someone's asked if you've passed SQ1 and SQ2.
Yes, I've passed both SQE1 in the July 22 sit-in and SQE2 in the April-May 23 sit-in, and I was admitted August 2023.
Yeah. Oh, someone's helpfully transcribed the event for us. Much appreciated, Christopher. Thank you. So I think we'll just start wrapping up now. But thank you everybody for all your questions. I hope we've got through most of them. So just to wrap up, perhaps just the last thoughts from people. What do you wish you'd known perhaps earlier about being a solicitor? What you particularly like to share with people about being a solicitor that we might not have talked about already. So Dan, what would you like to share with our attendees?
I think it's interesting hearing a lot about the other members of the panel's careers, because it is such a varied legal profession, and I think that's one thing that I think is important to know at the outset. There's so many different parts and different areas of law you can go into, and take your time, find what works for you and what doesn't. I've been racking my head over it all day about what might I wanted to know earlier. And I think it's largely around asking for help and just saying, you know what, I don't know what I'm doing here. I know a lot of trainees, and I've been there myself, that struggled with that concept, and it's something I constantly bang the drum about now. Just don't be afraid to say, actually, I haven't got a clue. I still do it every day. And I'll go through and say, what do you think about this? Because I have no idea. And my colleague, who is many years qualified, does the exact same to me. And it is about that collaboration on a team, and don't be afraid to do that.
Thank you. And Coralie, what would you like to share?
Yeah, I think I'll build on what Dan said. I think the asking for help and being collaborative with other people. I think people come into law thinking it's quite competitive, and it's perceived to be quite competitive, but actually we'll all not largely, maybe not all, very nice people. So people are willing to help, and and through my role in the law society and other legal profession societies, if you have a question about a practice area or about a firm, someone in your network will help. And I think it's really important to start building that network as a student, and with even with your fellow students, because as you go through your career, those would be the people that you're working with, that you're on the other side, that might be instructing you if they go in-house, and those relationships last a long time. I've been in Bristol for working in the legal profession for 15 years, and many of my friends are still people that I met when I first started, which is lovely in itself. But yeah, your network can be really powerful and really helpful, both now and in the future.
Yeah, thank you, Coralie. And yes, a shout out to all the junior lawyer divisions and the law societies. We'll again pop a link on, because there is a list of them all. And if you haven't gone along, we really encourage you, whatever stage you are in your career, to go along to your local law society. Zafar, what would you like to share? What would you wish you'd known earlier about being a solicitor?
I think it's an excellent profession. I think I've made the right choice. I've thoroughly enjoyed the journey. It's not been easy, of course, and I suppose no job is. But I think for me, having a really good supervisor principal at the beginning really helped me, and it's just similar, I guess, to what Dan and Coralie have said in terms of being able to ask for help and making it feel like that's normal is very important. So if you are unable to ask for help, or you think that you shouldn't be, then I think you should be asking yourself questions in terms of it might not be the right practice for you. So I think training and supervision at the early stages of your legal career is really, really important. Anything I would change that I would have liked to know, but now I don't think so. I don't think there's anything in particular that that comes to my mind at the minute. I've really enjoyed my journey, and I hope whoever enters this legal arena has the same outcome.
Oh, thank you. Well, thank you all for joining us. I can see one more question. We'll reply to you separately if that's okay, Eunice. But thank you everyone for joining us. I hope you found it helpful, the panel. We try and do career events every kind of 2 to 3 months. Yeah, I hope it's given everyone a bit of motivation. Certainly I've learned an awful lot about 3 solicitor roles, which is only 3 out of the however many hundreds of thousands that there are out there. But yeah, thank you very much. Appreciate your time. Yeah, we look forward to seeing you all soon. Thank you.